The Martian habitat, a fragile bubble of humanity, hummed with the constant, almost imperceptible symphony of its own survival. Outside, the endless, unforgiving void of space pressed in, a silent, ever-present threat. Inside, life persisted, meticulously engineered, each breath a testament to ingenuity and resilience. Dr. Aris Thorne, the lead engineer, often found himself listening to this symphony, the rhythmic whoosh of air scrubbers, the faint, high-pitched whine of life support systems, each sound a stark reminder of their absolute reliance on technology. His shoulders carried the invisible weight of past failures, a previous crew lost due to a design flaw that still echoed in his quiet moments, a ghost in the machine of his own mind. Daily life in the habitat was a carefully choreographed dance against oblivion. Every system was monitored, every parameter meticulously maintained. The air, recycled and scrubbed, carried the faint metallic tang of Martian dust, a constant sensory link to the alien world outside their protective dome. Aris, a man whose life was measured in atmospheric pressures and structural integrity, found a strange comfort in this routine, even as the memories gnawed at him. He knew, better than anyone, the razor-thin margin between triumph and disaster on this desolate planet. Then, a whisper of anomaly. It began subtly, a barely perceptible drop in pressure reported by a peripheral sensor in Sector Gamma. The automated diagnostics, meticulously programmed for redundancy and error correction, flagged it as a minor calibration issue. A software blip, nothing more. The system reran its checks, reported green, and the incident was logged, archived, and largely forgotten by the central AI. But Aris, with his engineer's intuition sharpened by years of high-stakes problem-solving and the bitter taste of past mistakes, felt a growing unease. It was a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, a discord in the habitat's otherwise perfect hum. He spent extra hours poring over the diagnostic reports, cross-referencing data points, his brow furrowed in concentration. The numbers all looked fine, yet the feeling persisted, an itch he couldn't quite scratch. One evening, unable to shake the feeling, Aris decided to conduct a manual inspection of Sector Gamma, dismissing the automated all-clears as insufficient. Armed with a high-resolution scanner and a flashlight, he navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the sounds of his own breathing amplified by the confined space. He ran the scanner along the critical structural beams, watching the digital readouts for any deviation, however minute. Most of the structure glowed a reassuring solid green on his handheld device. Then he saw it. A flicker. A single, almost invisible anomaly on a load-bearing beam near a junction box. He leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. It was microscopic, a hairline fracture so fine it could have been a stray Martian dust particle or a trick of the light. But the scanner, designed to detect flaws at the molecular level, registered it as a breach, however tiny, a micro-fissure, a pinprick in their fragile shield. Disbelief warred with a grim, sickening realization. This wasn't a calibration error, this was real. This was a threat. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The subtle hum of the habitat, once a comforting lullaby, now felt like a ticking clock. Aris's discovery of the micro-fissure triggered an immediate, albeit discreet, panic. Alarms, designed not to incite mass hysteria, but to alert key personnel, chimed with an insistent, low-frequency tone that vibrated through the habitat's skeletal structure. The crew, a finely tuned machine of professionals, reacted with a practiced efficiency that belied the growing knot of fear in their stomachs. Faces, usually etched with the calm focus of daily Martian life, now showed a flicker of apprehension, quickly masked by determined resolve. They moved with purpose, their movements economical, eyes scanning each other for reassurance, even as the unspoken question hung heavy in the recycled air. How bad is it? For Aris, the weight of responsibility pressed down like the Martian atmosphere itself. The memory of the previous crew, lost not to the unforgiving environment, but to a flaw in his own design, clawed at the edges of his consciousness. He saw their faces in the fleeting glances of his current team, each individual a precious life entrusted to his expertise. This wasn't merely a structural defect, it was a personal crucible. He pushed the haunting images aside, forcing his mind to focus on the immediate, terrifying reality. Detailed analysis of the fissure began instantly. High-resolution scanners, spectroscopic imaging, and micro-pressure sensors were deployed, their data streams converging in the Mission Control Center. The results painted a grim picture. The micro-fissure, initially dismissed as insignificant, was not merely a surface crack. It was a propagation point, a weakness that, under the constant pressure differential between the habitat's interior and the Martian vacuum, was rapidly expanding. The material stress around it was immense, a silent, invisible battle being waged at a molecular level. The unforgiving Martian environment, with its extreme temperature fluctuations and relentless radiation, was accelerating the degradation, turning a minor imperfection into a potential catastrophe. The diagnosis was stark. Without immediate intervention, catastrophic failure was not a possibility, but a certainty. The problem was clear, but the solution was anything but. They were on Mars, millions of miles from Earth, with limited resources and no possibility of quick resupply. Improvisation was their only ally. Aris, his mind racing, directed the first attempts at a temporary fix. Teams scrambled, gathering every available sealant, every rapid-cure polymer, every piece of reinforcing composite they could find. The habitat became a hive of frantic activity, each crew member a vital cog in the desperate machine. Makeshift patches were applied, a crude bandage on a mortal wound, but they were temporary at best, a desperate gamble against the relentless forces of physics. The clock was ticking, and with every passing minute, the pressure inside the habitat was subtly, inexorably dropping. As Aris supervised the application of a hastily concocted sealant, a secondary, more urgent alarm pierced the air. It wasn't the discreet chime of before. This was a sharp, insistent blare, cutting through the strained silence. A critical system, a primary atmospheric regulator in Sector Gamma, had faltered. The pressure loss, no longer a subtle decline, was accelerating. The micro-fissure, despite their desperate efforts, was winning. The habitat shuddered almost imperceptibly, a groan of stressed metal. The air scrubbers, already working overtime, whined louder, a desperate plea against the encroaching void. A cold dread, far more chilling than the Martian vacuum, settled over Aris. This was not just a leak. This was a race against time they were rapidly losing. The blaring alarm, a raw shriek of mechanical distress, was not merely a signal of accelerated pressure loss. It was a prelude to a far more insidious truth. As Aris Thorne, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, rushed towards the failing atmospheric regulator in Sector Gamma, a glint of unnatural damage caught his eye. It wasn't the clean, stress-induced tear of metal fatigue he had expected. Instead, the regulator's main conduit, a thick arterial tube designed to withstand immense pressure, bore the unmistakable marks of a precision cut, jagged and deliberate. This was no accident, no material defect. This was an act of sabotage. The realization hit Aris with the force of a physical blow, colder and more paralyzing than the Martian wind. His previous failures, the haunting specter of the lost crew, had been born of design flaws and miscalculations, tragic but ultimately impersonal. This was different. This was malice. Commander Lena Petrova, her face a mask of grim determination, arrived moments later, her eyes sweeping over the scene, quickly grasping the chilling implications. Her trust, a bedrock of their mission, shattered into 1,000 pieces. The shared silence between them spoke volumes, a chilling acknowledgement of betrayal from within their own ranks. The search for the saboteur began immediately, a grim internal hunt that turned the close-knit crew into a web of suspicion. Fingers, unspoken but felt, pointed towards a single individual. Kyle, a junior technician known for his volatile temper and a deeply ingrained resentment towards Aris. Kyle had always seen Aris's meticulousness as obsessive, his caution as cowardice, especially after a contentious design review where Aris had overridden Kyle's more aggressive, riskier proposals. The air in the habitat, already thin, grew heavy with unspoken accusations and fractured loyalties. Aris found Kyle in the auxiliary power core, hunched over a diagnostic panel, his shoulders hunched, radiating defiance. The confrontation was terse, crackling with suppressed anger. "Kyle," Aris began, his voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil within him. The regulator in Gamma. It wasn't an accident. Kyle flinched, a telltale sign that confirmed Aris's worst fears. He spun around, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and rage. "You always think you're so smart, Thorn. Always the hero. Always right." He spat, his voice laced with years of festering bitterness. "You cut corners. You take risks with our lives. Someone had to make you see." His motives, twisted by a misguided sense of justice, were laid bare. Kyle truly believed he was exposing Aris's perceived flaws, forcing a crisis to reveal what he thought was inherent weakness in the lead engineer's methods. He saw himself not as a saboteur, but as a reluctant truth-teller, even if his truth might cost them everything. Even as the truth of the betrayal unfolded, the habitat continued its agonizing decline. The microfissure, no longer microscopic, had become a grotesque spiderweb of cracks, snaking outward from the initial pinprick. Each visible line was a testament to the relentless pressure differential, a stark reminder of their accelerating demise. The faint hiss of escaping air had intensified into a mournful wail, a constant chilling soundtrack to their impending doom. Stress fractures propagated with terrifying speed, each creak and groan of the habitat's structure a death knell. Aris and Lena stood before the crew, the weight of their impossible situation pressing down on them. The choices were stark, brutal in their simplicity. They could abandon the habitat, retreating to the smaller, less equipped auxiliary module, a desperate gamble that offered little more than a temporary reprieve. Or they could risk everything, their lives hanging by the thinnest of threads on an untested, improvised solution to repair the ever-expanding fissure. The second option felt like madness, a desperate throw of the dice, but the first felt like surrender, a slow, agonizing death in a cramped metal box. The choice, stark and terrifying, hung heavy in the suffocating air. The suffocating air in the habitat thickened with the unspoken dread of their predicament. 3 grim options lay before them, each a precipice over an abyss. First, they could attempt to patch the rapidly expanding fissure using experimental Martian polymers, a substance theorized to self-heal under specific atmospheric conditions, but never tested under such dire stress. This option offered the potential for a full repair, restoring the habitat to its original integrity, but carried an immense risk of catastrophic failure if the polymers reacted unexpectedly or proved insufficient against the immense pressure differential. A burst structural beam meant instant decompression and a horrifying end for all. The second path involved evacuating to the smaller, less equipped auxiliary module. This would ensure immediate survival from the current breach, but the module was designed for temporary shelter, not long-term habitation. Its life support systems were minimal, its power reserves limited, and its capacity for scientific research, the very purpose of their mission, negligible. It was a retreat, a surrender of their goals, and a slow-burning death sentence for their scientific endeavors, if not their bodies. The psychological impact of such a move, The feeling of being trapped in a metal box would gnaw at their sanity. Finally, the third option, perhaps the most audacious, was to attempt a full structural reinforcement of the compromised section using the limited tools and materials at hand. This involved fabricating custom braces, welding patches, and applying multiple layers of conventional sealants. It was a brute force approach, labor-intensive and fraught with peril, demanding precision and endurance under extreme duress. The risk here wasn't just failure, but the inherent danger of working on a compromised structure, where a wrong move, a misplaced weld, or a sudden shift could accelerate the breach. Resource consumption for this option would be immense, draining their already dwindling reserves of power and breathable air for the duration of the repair. Aris Thorne felt the crushing weight of these choices, each one a gamble with the lives of his crew. The memory of the lost crew, a phantom limb of his past, throbbed with renewed intensity. He saw their faces, heard their final desperate pleas, and the silent accusation in their eyes. This time, the responsibility was entirely his. Every decision, every calculation, every command would determine whether history repeated itself. His hands, usually so steady, trembled almost imperceptibly. Commander Lena Petrova, a rock of stoicism amidst the storm, stood beside him. Despite the profound betrayal that had shaken the mission to its core, her faith in Aris remained unshaken. Her gaze, firm and unwavering, met his, a silent promise of support. "Whatever you decide, Aris," she murmured, her voice a low, steady counterpoint to the habitat's groans, "we follow your lead." Her trust was a fragile lifeline in the swirling vortex of doubt. Among the crew, opinions were sharply divided. Fear, a cold, insidious entity, gripped some, advocating for the immediate, albeit temporary, safety of the auxiliary module. Others, fueled by a desperate hope and the innate human drive to fight, argued vehemently for the bolder, more dangerous repairs, unwilling to abandon their mission or their primary home. Heated discussions erupted, voices frayed with stress, clashing in the strained atmosphere. The habitat itself seemed to amplify their anxieties. The constant, mournful hiss of leaking air was now a pervasive sound, a relentless reminder of their dwindling time. The creak of stressed metal, like the sigh of a dying beast, echoed through the corridors, each sound a punctuation mark in their collective despair. After what felt like an eternity, Aris closed his eyes, drawing a deep, ragged breath. He envisioned each scenario, each potential outcome, running complex simulations in his mind. The faces of his crew, their hopes and fears, flashed before him. The experimental polymers were a shot in the dark, too uncertain. The auxiliary module, a slow death. His decision, born of a chilling calculus and a desperate spark of ingenuity, was a path of immense risk, but also the only one that offered a chance for true recovery. "We reinforce," Aris stated, his voice a low, resolute whisper, cutting through the cacophony of fear and debate. "Full structural reinforcement, with every tool we have." It was an irreversible decision, a gamble with profound and terrifying consequences, but it was their only path forward. The decision made, Aris Thorne moved with a focused intensity that belied his inner turmoil. The chosen path, full structural reinforcement, demanded every ounce of their collective skill and resilience. He led the effort, his past failures not a burden, but a relentless driving force. The memory of the lost crew fueled his every action, transforming his grief into an unwavering resolve to protect the lives entrusted to him now. His hands, once trembling with indecision, were now steady, precise, guiding the frantic preparations. To everyone's astonishment, the saboteur, whose name remained unspoken but whose presence was a chilling reminder of their vulnerability, stepped forward. There was no grand apology, No dramatic confession, just a quiet, almost reluctant offer of help. Their unique skills, honed by a lifetime of meticulous, albeit misguided precision, proved invaluable. It was a moment of unexpected redemption, a silent plea for forgiveness in the face of impending disaster. The saboteur, whose deep-seated resentment had nearly cost them everything, now worked alongside Aris, their hands moving in a synchronized dance of desperation, welding and bracing, their personal animosity momentarily eclipsed by the existential threat. The repair operation was a grueling, high-stakes ballet against time. Equipment, pushed beyond its design limits, began to malfunction. A crucial plasma cutter sputtered and died, forcing them to improvise with an older, less efficient thermal torch. Oxygen levels, already carefully rationed, dwindled faster than anticipated, each breath a conscious effort. And outside, the relentless Martian dust, disturbed by the habitat's structural shifts, began to seep through the newly reinforced sections, a fine, abrasive powder threatening to compromise their delicate seals. Moments of intense tension punctuated the painstaking work. A section of the freshly applied polymer sealant, still curing, began to bubble ominously under the internal pressure. A near catastrophe was averted by Aris's quick thinking and the saboteur's astonishing dexterity as they managed to apply a rapid hardening patch just seconds before a complete blowout. The air crackled with unspoken fear, each crew member holding their breath, their muscles aching, their minds screaming for respite. The emotional toll was immense. Exhaustion etched lines of fatigue onto every face, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. Fear, a constant companion, was slowly giving way to a profound sense of camaraderie, a bond forged in the crucible of crisis. They were no longer just scientists or engineers. They were survivors, united by the shared experience of staring into the abyss and pulling back from its edge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last brace was secured, the final layer of sealant applied. Aris, his face streaked with sweat and Martian dust, ran a gloved hand over the newly reinforced section. The ominous hiss of leaking air had almost entirely subsided, replaced by a much fainter, almost imperceptible whisper. A profound silence fell over the crew, a moment of collective breath-holding. Then, slowly, steadily, the pressure gauges began to climb. The habitat, battered and scarred, was breathing again. The subtle hum of the systems, once a constant reminder of their fragility, now pulsed with a renewed, albeit tenuous, life. The immediate danger had passed, but the cost of their survival, both physical and emotional, was immense. The air, though now breathable, carried the lingering scent of ozone and triumph, intertwined with the bitter tang of what they had almost lost. The immediate aftermath of the repair was a strange tableau of relief and profound exhaustion. The habitat, though stabilized, bore the indelible scars of its near demise. Patches of experimental polymer gleamed dully against the original metal, new bracing struts crisscrossed critical junctions, and the air, now pressurized, still carried the ghost of the ozone tang and the faint, persistent scent of Martian dust. It was a victory, undeniably, but one etched with the heavy realization of what had been lost. Not lives, thankfully, but a sense of invulnerability, a crucial layer of innocence about their isolated existence. The saboteur, whose face remained a mask of quiet resolve, was not incarcerated. Commander Lena Petrova, with a pragmatism born of harsh experience, understood that resources were too precious to waste on retribution. Instead, a new role was carved out, one of heightened scrutiny and solitary, meticulous work. They became the habitat's unofficial, self-appointed guardian of structural integrity, their past betrayal now transmuted into an obsessive dedication to preventing any future breaches. It was a form of justice tempered with understanding, leveraging their unique, albeit misguided, talents for the collective good. The crew, though wary, eventually accepted this uneasy truce, recognizing the necessity of their skills in the unforgiving environment. Aris Thorne, leaning against a newly reinforced bulkhead, felt the heavy cost of survival settle upon him. The mission continued, but it was irrevocably altered. Resources, already meticulously budgeted, were severely depleted. The experimental polymers, the rapid curing patches, the emergency oxygen reserves, all had been drawn upon to their limits. Morale, though buoyed by their escape from catastrophe, was shaken to its core. The easy camaraderie had been replaced by a quiet vigilance, a shared understanding of their fragility. He reflected on the lessons learned. Trust, not in systems alone, but in the fallibility of human nature. Resilience, not just in materials, but in the unwavering spirit of those who faced impossible odds. The heavy cost of survival was not just measured in depleted supplies, but in the intangible weight of experience, the burden of knowing how close they had come to oblivion. Looking towards the future, Aris knew their approach to Martian habitation had to evolve. The incident had been a brutal, undeniable lesson. Heightened vigilance became paramount. New sensor arrays were designed to detect even the most microscopic anomalies, and protocols for emergency repairs were rewritten, informed by their harrowing, hands-on experience. Improved redundancy in critical systems became a priority, with backup power, air, and structural components planned for every conceivable failure point. The constant battle against the Martian environment, against its dust, its radiation, its vacuum, was now understood not as a series of challenges, but as an unrelenting war of attrition. Every breath, every moment of safety, was a victory hard-won. The habitat, a gleaming testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness, pulsed with renewed life. But its occupants understood, with a chilling clarity, that the pressure never truly left them. It was in the thin atmosphere just beyond the hull, in the unforgiving Martian soil, and in the quiet recesses of their own minds. On Mars, every breath was a calculated risk, a testament to humanity's audacious reach into the cosmos. As Aris gazed out at the desolate red landscape, a silent, breathtaking expanse stretching to the horizon, he wondered what other secrets the red planet held, what new challenges it would present, and how they would endure. The story of humanity on Mars was far from over. It had only just begun.